morning or afternoon, everyone. I'm so excited to be here for my third NCLTS. So thank you so much to the Andrew Goodman Foundation. I'm Angie Vuong. I use she, her, hers pronouns. I'm the campus champion at the University of San Francisco. So welcome and good morning and afternoon. And I'll pass it off to my co-presenter.
Hello there, and thank you. My name is Aklima Khondoker. I am the Chief Legal Officer of the New Georgia Project Action Fund and the New Georgia Project. And I'm so happy to join you all today to talk about effective organizing and mobilizing and building momentum for an advocacy movement. I can't wait to get it going, and I'm so happy to be here with you all.
Great. So there's not much time, but I kind of want to get everyone to message in the chat where you are zooming in from. Just like rapid fire where you're zooming in from. I'm calling from San Francisco. It is incredibly cloudy per usual. I see Columbus, I see Jersey, I see Milwaukee, Dallas, Wisconsin, New York, Kentucky, a ton of folks. So it's really nice to see everyone across the country join in, and just thank you so much to the foundation. Our session is about how do you build momentum in advocacy, and all of you have been hard at work on that this past year, the past few years, and we're excited to just to thank you and all of our peers across the board for turning out for this 2020 election, and in this past year when increasing injustices and threats to our democracy is even more important now more than ever to build momentum, to advocate for the issues that we most care about. So Aklima and I are excited to kind of share with you some quick tools on how to advocate effectively. So Aklima, how about we go tit for tat, one by one or such, and just have a convo about it. So
Yes, that sounds great. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna give a quick background of where I'm from and the situation that I'm in currently. You may notice from behind my back, I have some empty shelving there because I'm in the process of moving. But that is a part of movement work, is being able to effectively move regardless of what situation you are within. And that's what we're here today to discuss. So what are we going to talk about? So we're talking about how we mobilize and build momentum for an effective advocacy movement. The way that I think we should think about this is, number one, what are you passionate about? What communities do you want to help? Who will be with you on your journey as you decide to impact your community? And the best ways to convince others that momentum around your issue matters and is worthy of pursuit. Because if you don't have an army behind you, you're not going to have much momentum. But what we're going to cover in this section here is how we get other people to come on board, your community leaders, your stakeholders, people that are invested in your movement. That's what we'll talk about there. But we're going to talk right now, I think at the very top, about what you are passionate about. So I'm going to cover that piece and I'm going to pass it on to Angeline, and we're going to keep this pushing. So how do you figure out how to even start a movement? What are you passionate about is always the question that I like to start with. And before I talk about the issue or the problem, I like to start with the people. So what that means is considering the communities where you can be more impactful. Consider the people behind your project. Do not consider it just a project. Just don't think, well, there is this general problem and I want to fix it. Always start with your people, because that is your best way to learn most about the issue, and that is your best way to find your way towards a solution. So figure out what you're passionate about. Is it environmental justice? Is it racial justice issues? Is it LGBTQ issues? Is it voting rights? Personally, for me, it's going to be voting rights. I'm a voting rights lawyer and I work in the voting rights space. And for me, the basis of my work starts from voting rights, because it's through voting rights that all of our other rights under the Constitution are based. And so that is where I concentrate my work. So what I'm trying to indicate here by saying that I care about voting rights, I'm also saying that I care about civil rights. I'm also saying I care about legal reform, because all of these things kind of stem from that. So that's another way that you can think about your passion, right? Like, your passion doesn't have to be condensed to LGBTQ rights and it's a singular focus. LGBTQ rights considers far more things than that. It considers transgender rights. We're talking about your own voting rights, your access to identification so that you can show yourself to the world as you are and still have those rights guaranteed to you under the Constitution. So there are several branches that we consider when we're thinking about how to build our movement. Start with your community. That will help to ground you in your passion, and then you'll just move out from there. So, for some examples about how I've been able to do this, thinking about community specifically, I mentioned that I focus on voting rights. So, one of the ways that I've done that prior to my time at the New Georgia Project, I was with the ACLU of Georgia, where I was a staff attorney and the senior manager for the Voting Access Project, which is a project I started at the ACLU. Being that my focus is on voting rights, I started to think about the communities that are most affected by having their voting rights abridged. And that took me down the path of looking at college students, university students, and how they can access the ballot. And so one of the initiatives that I started at the ACLU with the Voting Access Project is to ensure that more students had access to a voting site, either on their campus or near their campus. And so because I consider that community, I connected with people at Valdosta State University. I'm here in Georgia. And over at VSU, we noticed that one of their locations was closed. They didn't have a voting site on campus. So because I connected with that community, I connected with the Young Democrats, the Young Republicans. We're a nonpartisan organization, so no shade for whatever side you're on. But we connected with student leaders in that community to get a sense of what's important to them and what would help them to further this interest of gaining the right to access the ballot. So I did a lot of listening, and we figured out that the best pathway forward would be to have a location installed on that college campus. But again, I started with listening to those students, figuring out what their needs are, and then we found a path forward. Now, this still aligned with my overall goal of voting rights advocacy, because that's important to me, but also the sub interest there would be voting rights for college students. So that was something that I was able to bring together by first connecting with the community. So I hope that that kind of gives us a good way to frame the way that we're going to go through this conversation now. But I want to pass it on to Angie to, of course, provide any of her experiences that she's had building momentum within those communities. And then we will just keep it pushing because I know we're limited on time. So Angie, over to you.
Thank you so much. I love how you said that everything starts with people, like policy is about people, advocacy is about people, building momentums is about people and the community of which we are part of. So the second step that I always see in effective policy or effective movement building is building that team and identifying your stakeholders. That's so important. That kind of builds the foundation of what you expressed as the problem definition and the solution that you propose, right? You could look at folks who can help you plan, make connections with them, help you execute those great ideas that you have. And kind of for us at the University of San Francisco, our team are young people who are really passionate about voting rights. Talk to your friends, your colleagues, different clubs, different student council groups, to kind of figure out who's interested in joining your advocacy efforts. So, and when you kind of figure that out, you kind of look at the folks who are going to be your North Star, the community folks who will fight alongside you for a specific issue. It's kind of like analyzing the landscape. Who are you going to be working alongside in the trenches? Who do you need to build relationships with to talk to? And that can be at a university setting, administration, the president's office, the registrar's office, student leadership and engagement, cultural councils, if you have them, Greek life, housing, all of these folks that are kind of building the web of a university structure, which is the space that I am in. From our experience, it was really important for our USF Votes team to reach out to as many people as possible and to recruit and retain people, as many people as possible, so that they could buy into this idea of voting for young people at the University of San Francisco. And the stakeholders who are most impacted or interested in your advocacy efforts are the folks who feel it the most. So there are people who are within your community who you want to help and who you want to learn from. So include them when you want to um, have a conversation with them. It's always really important to think about the building the team aspect as a reciprocal sort of relationship. It's not transactional. It's about intentionality. It's about reciprocity. It's about being culturally humble. Um, and the folks who will be gaining from your advocacy are folks who have bought in, people who understand, and people who kind of fight alongside you. For us, an example to kind of recruit and identify stakeholders specifically for to get undocumented or non-citizens to vote at USF is for us to kind of have conversations. We have a very large non-citizen student population on campus, and it's important for us to have them be civically engaged in the ways that they feel most comfortable. So meeting them, talking to them, going to their meetings, that's how you kind of build your team. That's how you kind of identify the landscape of different various stakeholders. And when you do that, you get to our third step, which I'll pass off to Aklima as well.
Fantastic, Angeline. I really love that community emphasis because that's how you make a community impact, is really connecting with those folks, building your tribe, and then figuring out the people who care, who have a stake in this, which I think is so critical. And one of the things that you had mentioned is, who are your university people? So in that example I provided before, it might be your university president. If we're talking about voting rights, if you're in a state like Georgia, it's going to be your local board of elections office. These are people who care about the work that you're doing. They have a stake in the outcome of your advocacy plan. So these people are very important. You have your tribe who are going to be out there with you, passing out pamphlets, posting things online, but then you have your stakeholders, the people that are going to say yay or nay about what you're doing, the people that you may have to push over to your side. But then third, you also have this broader audience that you want to get looped into what you're doing. So you have the community at large. And in this larger ring, this community at large, if we're still thinking about the university as an example, so we're thinking about the town that the university is in, we're thinking about the county, we're thinking about the state. We can broaden this out as far as we want to, but the point of figuring out who our audience is that's how we get more buy-in for more people, and that's how we really empower our movement. So we have that mobilization aspect with our tribe and with our stakeholders, but our empowerment piece, that really comes from the larger audience who we need to be bought in. So we've identified our community, our team, our stakeholders, so figure out who that broader audience is, and then we figure out how to communicate with them. So that broader audience within this context, that can be policymakers, that can just be members of the community who you want to sign on your petition, people who maybe live in the place where you're doing this work, who you really need to empower what you're doing. These sorts of people are who you need to think about. And now you have to figure out how to effectively communicate with them. So we have some examples of what's effective. And now I think the most critical tool to think about when you're considering effectiveness is how persuasive you can be, and what really what calls somebody to listen to what you're talking about. We rely on things like statistics, figures, facts in digestible forms, because when people receive them, they're now your movement is now legitimized. So I say all that to say that the phrase that you ought to be thinking about when you consider buy-in is legitimation. How do we make this a legit thing that people want to be a part of? Here are some ways to make it legit. So that way it's easier for you when you need to communicate with the community and get them to buy in. Interviews, surveys, phone banking, literature drops, digital activations, doing things online, press coverage. We've used the press a lot, where we're able to say, look, we're showing up in front of the Georgia State Capitol. We need y'all to show up too, because we're talking about X, Y, and Z. That is your opportunity to have your tribe, your community come through with signs, come through with your messaging has to be very effective to show, here is our issue, here's what we want, here's what we need to happen. All of those things will come together when you are trying to legitimize your message to the community. These are some tools that you can use. Research is important, white papers are important. So if, for example, you're in this university setting and let's say that one of your important stakeholders, the university president, is not on board with what you're talking about, but there's somebody who's also part of this larger community outreach, because if you can't get through that stakeholder, you can't do the rest of the work. So an effective thing here in this example is maybe they need to see statistics. They need to see the numbers behind what you're talking about. They need to have something to legitimize what you are discussing in their minds, so that way they can go along with you and you can get more community buy-in. So this is something that I think is very important for us to think about. And communication efficacy, so how well you are, how well you do this, it should really be measured by the community you want to reach. So that means you speak their language. In this example, I gave the university president, who's a stakeholder, but also a part of that larger community, because you need to convince this person that your messaging, your movement is worthy and merits them pushing it along for you. And so that's why it's important to speak their language, which sometimes is through statistics and research. But let us keep this moving along as we are coming down on time. The last and final piece actually wraps and summarizes this all together. So I want to pass it on to Angeline for creating your advocacy plan. And then we're hopping into some questions.
Just like boom, 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 right? Oh my goodness gracious. I think this part is my favorite part of the plan, the toolkit, all the different tools in your toolkit is that advocacy plan. Just kind of condensing everything from who your community is, defining your problem, thinking about the communication strategy. How are you going to do this successfully to mobilize others by outlining this work that you intend to do to support alongside and help the community? So this is where you lay out clearly what your problem definition is, what your issue is. This is where you lay out what the solution is. This is where you lay out what's the background information, what's the evidence that Aklima mentioned, and then who is involved. Who is in your team? What are their leadership positions? Who do you need to reach out to? And getting creative ways to think about sharing that story, because telling the story and sharing that story is the most exciting part of any advocacy movement. Because when you share your story, people connect with you. The community connects with you. They connect with the issue. Who's in your squad? Who do you need to convince? Who do you need to persuade? Use all of that learning and the lived experiences that you have of what you're passionate about in your community and where you come from and where you want to move to. That comes into all of this, all into the advocacy plan. And I think this is why advocacy is so exciting at this point in time with young people like you rising up. It's Rise Up weekend, just rising up to kind of speak truth to power consistently all the time. And that's kind of how we get moving. Aklima had an amazing transition at the very front end of movement. Like, you should be able to rest when you need to, take care of yourself. But then when you wake up that next day, tell yourself and remind yourself what that purpose is. What are you most invested in? Who in your community do you most invest with and care about? So, Aklima, any last words from a badass like yourself?
Thank you. And likewise, let me just say this. When you said that, what I thought about was we have NGP swag that says eat, sleep, drink, organize, repeat. That's exactly what it is. Eat.
Pretty sure I have that shirt.
Organize, repeat. Exactly. That is what you're doing. So that is why I just got off of picking up a U-Haul truck. We have all of our stuff here and we are moving out, but I'm still here because that is a part of movement work. That is how important this is, because you have to keep that in mind. Make your time to rest. Yes, take care of yourself. And yes, create the culture and environment that you envision for your future and the future that you want to come after you. So we're not saying work yourselves to the bone until there's nothing left, but we are saying this is movement work. So you have to be ready for it. You have to lace up your shoes and get ready to go when the time comes, because it's about making those connections. It's about coordinating everything and making sure that everybody keeps that momentum going. So we have to keep that pushing. So I see we have some questions and I know we have 5 minutes left. So I'm happy to take this first one. How do you take care of your personal wellness as an advocacy leader? So this is a very important and necessary question. I would say foundational to everything that we're doing, because self-care means everything. If there is no self, then there is no movement. You can't do anything without you. So number one, start with what your boundaries are. What is your capacity? Do that in a realistic way. Do you have a previous medical condition that might prevent you from putting in the amount of time that your squad or team or movement might rely on? Let folks know that. Do you have children? Do you have a family? What are some of the things that you prioritize in your life that you must make sure that you handle? Because those must be at the forefront. Everything else you schedule around that. You have to feel at peace when you're doing this so you can bring your best self to the movement. If you're not able to bring your best self to the movement, you're going to be doing the movement a disservice. Mm-hmm. So define your time. One of the tricks that I have is I have a very active calendar where it feels like every hour I have a thing. But if I notice that there's a block in that calendar, I'll go ahead and put busy. I'll go ahead and put personal. I'll go ahead and do something. So one of the biggest takeaways for me is I schedule out personal time. That is how I take care of wellness. I schedule it out from when am I going to wake up? When am I going to take that first meeting? When am I absolutely doing nothing? So don't talk to me. I'll put it on my calendar and then I will commit to myself to stick to that, because that is how we do well in the movement, by taking care of ourselves and setting that example for the community. So we see, you want to take the next one, Angeline?
Sure. I think I'm going to move up. My thing is kind of exploding right here, which is great. That means you are engaged. Jaden, thank you, Jaden, for your question. I'm starting a hazing prevention movement on my college campus. How can storytelling be helpful in empowering students? I think stories kind of is the thread that kind of holds everything together. Storytelling is so incredibly powerful, but with storytelling comes the communication aspect of it. It's how do students like yourselves respond? Is storytelling through TikTok? Is storytelling through impactful videos that are meaningful and kind of connect with you emotionally, but also provide a call to action? I think this aspect is really important, and you should look at the different resources that you currently already have in your toolkit and kind of use that. Test it out, beta test it with other folks. And also, if you're going to be doing it on a college campus, maybe even propose the idea to your Office of Marketing and Communications at your university. They might also have some ideas as well. So using all the tools in your toolkit to create a compelling story is so important. And for an issue like hazing prevention, that's super key and kind of built into traditional university settings. And so I think having that, knowing what the story is, knowing what the narrative is, and providing examples and real people to be a face for the movement is important. And that can be a great way to tell that story.
Yes, I love that. And I apologize, Alex Harris. I see your question here. I passed over it because I didn't see it, so apologies. But I see your question. How do you persuade your school's administration of something when statistics don't work? So I think this really falls on what Angeline was just talking about, the impact of effective storytelling. So figure out like what is important to your school's administration, right? Think about what could be important to them, or you could figure it out by having that conversation with them. Getting to know them is one way to do that. But we think about a school's administration. They care about registration rates. They care about making sure that they are cultivating a positive university experience for all of their students. So you could couch your movement within that. You could say that the reason why we attend university studies is because we want to be civically engaged. And whatever it is your movement is, just fill in the blank and just say, doing this will get us to why. And that's what we need to get to. If you want this to be a positive experience for all of your students on the campus, if you care about registration rates, which I know you do, then you will care about this thing, because this is how we can use our university studies in an effective way. This is how we can do that. And so if that's your storyboard, think of it that way. Your next step then is to get stories from your colleagues, from your schoolmates. Talk to them. Say, look, if you had this on campus, would that interest you? If we had a change in this, if our administration would budge on this, would that give you a better experience? that is your first way of petitioning. That is your first way of collecting signatures. So that way you could sway that person who may be unswayed by statistics, but with localized statistics. They're still statistics, but they're more localized now. They're focused in on that university, on that campus, on that student body. And that's going to sway them because they care about registration rates. They care about a great civically engaged student body. So consider what it is that the administration wants to hear, and make that aligned with the work that you do.
Thank you. You captured that so beautifully. And thank you so much to everyone for sharing space today. I'm really thrilled, and this pumps me up for the rest of the day at Rise Up Weekend. So I'm going to drop my email in the chat, Aklima, if you want to as well. And thank you so much to all of you. Just applauding all of you young people. And my heart pitter patters because of this. And thank you so much to the Andrew Goodman Foundation for sharing space and providing this opportunity for all of us.
Yes, and likewise, whatever it is, y'all could do it. Do not be persuaded otherwise. Do not let anything prohibit you from passing that threshold. You can make it through, you can do it, and you can get others to come through too. So let's get it. Have a happy weekend. Thank you, Andrew Goodman Foundation. Thank you, everybody, for having us come on. We cannot wait to see what you do next. Our information is in the chat. Reach out to us whenever you can. Thanks, y'all.